Good evening, everyone. This is Seda Redak speaking at the Entrepreneur's Kitchen. Another exciting episode. This week we have Hans Christian Boos as our guest. He is the former and again current CEO of Arago, and also he's one of the most interesting, most brilliant AI minds in Germany. People call him the German AI explainer, and also. He coined the term horizontal AI. So we also want to understand what that means. Hello, Chris. Welcome.
That's going to be an interesting conversation. Hi, Seda.
Yeah, and I already heard that you have an organ, a Hammond organ, in just where you're sitting right now. So let us hear.
You like the Mighty Quinn, right? We can go to... I love it.
Awesome. So you're a music fan. Let's start with that. Why are you so interested in performing? Because I know also you have like all sorts of instruments in your office room. So let's talk about that before we start.
Well, I think music is just beautiful. It's such a combination of emotion and math, and it's a way to bring life together. I've always found music is the best way to bring people together. It's so amazing. And I've always enjoyed making it. I wanted to become a musician once, and that didn't work out, right? So ended up with computers, but I could never leave making music.
Yeah. And you still make an effort every day to kind of be close by with your instruments and kind of play a few notes.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's really just that few notes. And at the beginning of Corona, I had this idea I should finally, for all the time, right? I've started classical instruments, flute and then piano, and then I played keyboards and sang in a rock band. But I always wanted to play the guitar. So 4 months ago, I started playing the guitar. I'm really crap.
Oh, so you're learning the guitar. Well,
just that total beginner.
That's awesome. But you just, said one of the keywords that I really want to talk deeply about today, and that is Corona. And I know you were involved with the, how does it called? PEPPPT. A name normal citizens will never remember. It's called Pan-European Privacy Preserving Proximity Tracing.
You looked that up. Tell me.
I did. So, but how did it start? Because you were the head, you were the person who was leading this effort. You were kind of also the idea father, so to speak. And then things kind of turned into a different direction. And as far as I have seen, also from the press, you were for more a centralized solution. So let's talk about all of those aspects a little bit.
Well, first of all, I'm definitely not the initiator of everything, right? So, I mean, the whole, this string of work in the world started with Thomas Weigand and myself, who had a meeting at the Health Innovation Hub. And there was a lot about discussion what could or should be done about the Corona pandemic at the time, when in Germany it was really still very, very small. Like I think we had 18 infections or so. But we had the problem that this would that it would go exponential, right? And that we had this time. And basically we asked ourselves, okay, how can we do something that gets us the necessary tracing results without destroying privacy completely? Because I mean, what is working really well in China is something that you could simply not do in a democracy, or shouldn't do in a liberal democracy. At least it fits the system, right? In elsewhere, but it just wouldn't fit our system, and it works. So the question was, can we do something that works? But that also works with privacy? And the answer is yes. And that's what we started out doing. And I think that with the results, I mean, I am semi-happy, right? Because I am happy that it worked out. There's lots of Corona tracing apps now in various countries. I'm not so happy that most of those don't interact yet. I mean, one of the big things of PEPPT was making those compatible and interactive. So you would only need one, and you'd be traceable throughout the world. But people are still working on it. We're still making contributions to this, and this is part of the ETSI now as an industry standards group. So it's being developed. It just takes a while, and it's coming out of there.
But I have a question. I mean, when I first also saw, the efforts around the Corona app, and of course, people immediately kind of compared it with the Chinese or with the Pan-Asian versions, and lots of people kind of got hysterical about the privacy. And then, yet, when you had the latest version compared to, let's say, something like a WhatsApp or a Facebook. I mean, in terms of privacy, the German version managed to do really well. But does that really, at the end of the day, help?
What does it help? Does it help Corona, or does it help privacy?
Well, does it help if you say that, when we say that if you can only go up to a certain level of communication between the devices, and you can't really, trace back a lot, or you can't also communicate with international clients within the same system. So does that really help contain and understand how these clusters are actually being formed, or does that just help contain the individual person?
It will just help the individual. And I mean, this is what it was set out to do. It depends, right? The French version is different, but the version that we have in Germany, it works this way. But this is what people wanted. And I mean, you just said in the beginning that I am more for a centralized version. I think I've always said government should have a choice, right? What they want. And in Germany, the government made the choice to go for a decentralized version because that's what the loud part of the public wanted. And we have, with the pros and cons now, a decentralized version. A lot of people really downloaded it. So I think it's more than 14 million by now, which is great. And they're using it, which is great. But obviously you can't generate data from it. Maybe it'll come in the future version. It can't do things like, if you wanted to have an app that would control more of a pandemic management, like to, for example, prevent something like was happening in the meat factory at Tönnies, right? That's not possible with this type of approach, and you'd need more data to do that. But I mean, look, it's a democracy. That's the whole point. The government did what the people wanted, and that's okay. What I'm always for, and what I really think is necessary, is that governments are actually able to make that choice.
Yeah, I think that's really a great point. But also, can you briefly explain what would be the main differences, or what are the main differences between a centralized and a decentralized version of this kind of app?
I have I'll explain gladly, as we've done many times, right? If you promise to answer a question to me after that.
Well, of course.
Let me explain first, and then you'll get yourself into trouble, right? So,
oh my God.
In a decentralized version, you store your contacts on your phone. Everything is anonymized, so nobody has their names or anything. It's all anonymized IDs, right? So you store the IDs on your phone of who you've met, and if you get infected, if you get a positive test, right, you will transmit your IDs, all the IDs that you have used, to a centralized server, and everybody else can download your ID from that centralized server. So the comparison, have you met an infected person, is made on your phone only, meaning that you're the only one who knows that you've actually met someone. The upside of this is no one can trace the contacts of anyone, right? I can't, there's no data set, the government doesn't have a data set, no one has a data set that shows what anonymous ID is meeting what other anonymous ID. The downside of this is, I don't know who has been met. I can't give exact advice to people, like should they quarantine, should they get tested, do they need to wear masks? Okay, we're wearing masks now anyway, and so on, right? So I'm very unexact. I don't know anything about clusters. I don't know who could be a super spreader or anything like this. But the upside is you're the only one who knows that you've been in contact, and the expectation is that you act responsibly. Now, in a centralized system, everything works the same. Your contacts are stored on your phone. In the case of infection, though, you don't just upload your own ID, you upload your contact list. And then a centralized system can send that contact list and actively contact these people. And because there is more data, this means that you can do a better risk calculation and you actively manage these people. The downside is that now you have a data set at the government that has the contacts, let's say, like looks like little flowers, right? Contact flowers of infected people. They don't know who they are. They're all anonymized, but it is information that is centrally stored. And the upside is that you can do risk calculations and that you actively can approach these people. So now all of this is happening anonymously, right? So only you as a person are able to reveal yourself, say, I am behind these anonymous IDs. And now my question to you, why the hell does this matter? I am so happy. Let me give you, I was so devastated of this fight that was there, because it's really totally unnecessary. That it would diminish trust, and that people would not download the apps and so on and so forth. I mean, fortunately in Germany, we have a lot of reasonable and sensible people, and they download the apps. But this whole fight, it was, why was this necessary? Like, why do you care? Why do you even ask this question? Is it all of those approaches are privacy preserving? Are you asking the question because there was a big hoo-ha in the media, or do you actually care?
Well, actually, I do care, and I also want to kind of eliminate these points. I believe, and I see every now and then, that media make you believe things, or media make opinion in certain things without actually giving you the whole truth, or the different perspectives of the truth, or the different perspective. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a truth in the room. So.
Sorry for interrupting you, but this was the interesting part. The media didn't do that. It was scientists, right? Scientists ran the campaign. And that's what's scary. I mean, fight about the best solution is part of science. But to make that part of a media campaign, right, is scary. And that is something that we have to get used to. Right, we're in a world where we try to be so politically correct that having a fight, like having an honest discussion, debate, where we get tough amongst ourselves, right? That's kind of, we're trying to get that out of the system. Now we bring science into the system, where having a fight about the best solution is what you do in order to get better, right? And now that is held in media. That's a challenge. It's actually. And of course, it's very tempting, right? Because as a scientist, then all of a sudden you're in all these papers and so on and so forth. But it's also the way it should work, right? We have to learn to have more debates and talk about up and downside. What I really think is really funny, this whole discussion about should the government have this data set or not? I mean, this was what the discussion was about, mainly held by people who are paid by the government.
Interesting.
Right? Who are paid by the government because they work for universities and so on. And the second part is, and you see, if anybody who's got this conspiracy theory that we're living in a dictatorship or authoritarian state, we have people paid by the government who can change the public opinion in a way that the government cannot hold the data set and move on, right? So that is the second thing that I find strange is, after, like, when you get sick, right, you go to a public healthcare system, everything, all anonymity drops.
Yeah.
Everybody knows who you are. Of course they do, because you're sick and you're going to be treated, right? That is, and personally, I had to make this screenshot, right, of top download, Corona warn, second one, WhatsApp, third one, TikTok.
awesome. Exactly. Yeah, that's really absolutely, that's strange. And as you have also mentioned, it's opinion making in a kind of really unintuitive way, also leaving the public in some sort of darkness by using certain, fear words in the titles, privacy, and everybody gets like so scared. On the other hand, as you just said, the number 4 is TikTok and number 2 is WhatsApp, and everybody is sharing everything on Facebook. So you can.
But let's see the positive side of this.
Yeah.
For a long time, most of us thought that no one would care about privacy.
Yeah.
Right. So, and now we cared enough about privacy to change the type of system we use in Germany, to change the type of system we use for fighting Corona. That's a good thing. And it's honestly, we will need commercial applications to go beyond this, to be able to fight or control or manage pandemics or infection chains and so on in companies. Or at events or in tourism and so on, so that the public solutions will not do that properly. But the public solutions are privacy preserving, and I would say it's a good thing that there was so much interest in this, because it shows that privacy finally starts playing a role, and that's the main concern that I think anybody should have with getting rid of privacy through social media or all these other platforms that are out there, is people need to care, because as long as they don't care, right, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and also
people cared.
Yeah, and also not knowing is, I think, also one part of the equation as well, or not being interested in the in the real representation of what is what. So we base our daily life so much on assumptions without really asking the critical thinking questions to go beyond what's being just fed to us by the media that kind of just supports our own filter bubbles. So we kind of see the things we want to see, and all the rest does not necessarily exist. And it looks like at the end of the day, it looks like always a war around beliefs.
Well, but science is not about belief, right? So that's the critical point. I've got one of those T-shirts, right, and it says like science does not care what you believe, and that's really the point. Yet, if you want to make a decision of what is adequate in a country, in your society, in your group, whatever, then it comes down to your beliefs, and your beliefs are important in that case. And this is why the only thing that I always said is the governments need to have a choice. And I would have preferred to see interoperability built into this from the get-go. Now it's coming later, but it's still coming, so it's okay.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this is obviously also a question around trust. So the German government, in this case, says we trust in our citizens that they will be, mindful about if they receive a warning, so they will take the correct actions to correct the course of, not spreading this disease further. On the other hand, the citizens could also say, we trust our government enough, so we know that they will be really sensitive around this centralized solution, how they deal with our data. So what do you see the level of trust in the public when it comes to questions around also AI and data? So what is your opinion? Do we have an issue of trust?
Absolutely, right? I mean, and in the case with citizenship and government, I mean, given the German history of the last 100 years, I think it is pretty clear why citizens kind of take a closer look at government. Was it the Third Reich Germany, or was it the Eastern Bloc Germany, right? So there's always been really bad structures in place. So given that, it shows that a lot of people are interested in history, which is great, right? We're not interested. On the other hand, is it right of the government to trust the citizens to do that? I would say, fuck yeah. I mean, that's the citizens are the sovereign of a democracy. If you can't trust the citizens to behave correctly, right, then the country should just dissolve.
Mm-hmm.
And of course you need law and order and so on, but you cannot force something down your sovereign's throat that they don't want, right? So if they want to infect themselves, go ahead, infect yourselves. The real problem with Corona, or the real problem that I have with this, people that go out and protest and say my body, my choice, that's bullshit, because you're not choosing for yourself. This is not like abortion, right? This is, you're choosing to infect someone else. You're putting someone else in danger. And that is more dangerous. It's a more complicated philosophical problem, like what's acceptable in terms of what you do to others.
Now I want to change topics, but before I change topics, I slightly change toppings first of my salad, because I have to talk about
what do you put in there.
So this is radicchio, and I have some how do you say fresh onions, and then okay, I have no idea how to call this in English. It's Vogelsalat. They call it Vogelsalat in German. And
I can tell you the other thing you just had is called scallion in English.
Oh yeah, excellent.
And I have in German it's called Feldsalat, right? In Austrian it's called Feldsalat, and I have no clue what that is called in English.
Yeah, so guys, go figure out, ask your AI to tell you the translation of Vogel or Feldsalat. And the music comes in. Well, let's make a hard change of topics, or kind of hard change of topics. I know that you are also a kind of provocateur of in some circles, because you promote the understanding of general AI. You say, you know, we should work on it. It should work finally, and people get all like, oh my God, general AI. That's a you know, huge topic and terrible thing. And then you recently also coined the term horizontal AI. So let's talk about what you mean by that.
So I hope I'm not the one coining that term. Anyway, AI in itself, artificial intelligence, is a bad name, right? So because it creates all these implications in our heads, right? When we hear intelligence, we think of robots, and then we have all these science fiction movies where the AI is always bad. Of course, like, the movie would be very boring if the AI just was, just existed. And then sometimes we deal with conflict, like what is it to be an artificial life form, and like in Star Trek with Lieutenant Commander Data. And that is what is normally called AGI. And I don't think that we have any clue how to build anything like this. An intelligence, a technical intelligence that has its own will, that has its own goals, that will set its own things. We don't have the ability to do that. And sometimes I'm misunderstood, and this is why I no longer use the term general AI, because that's not what I mean. I'm not talking about the robot that will say, I love you or I hate you, and mean it, right? Yeah. Maybe there are lots of hoax showcases out there that actually do this, right? And they bat their eyes and you think they're flirting with you, but actually what they're doing is they pattern match what you have done when you were flirting with someone else. Right? So I'm talking about a lot of people understand under the term general artificial intelligence, or AGI, basically a being with its own will. And that, I would say, for the next 150 years, we're not going to see that. That's a wild prediction, right? But I think we're pretty safe on that one. What I'm talking about is the ability to have an AI algorithm and, without retraining, apply it to multiple problems. Because the problem is that if you have a narrow AI, which is typically what we have today, right? And we use a lot of data and a lot of energy, and really a lot of energy to teach it this one little thing. The one little thing that if I travel from Frankfurt to Munich, when should I buy the plane ticket so it's the cheapest, right? That's the one thing. That takes up a shitload of energy. And you can see that there's a lot of questions, and a lot of the large data center providers, all they measure by is energy consumption. And then they put their data centers into funny locations like Iceland or Finland, where you can get thermic energy for free. And that is, has a very strong limit, because if you have to, if you have a little problem like traveling from Frankfurt to Munich, when is the time to buy the plane ticket to make it cheapest? Now, look, I am looking at a lot. I'm looking at the travel industry. I'm looking at airports. I'm looking at all this stuff right now. If I get a related problem, saying traveling from Frankfurt to Munich, when would I travel so I get the best train connection? Right? 50% of what I need, I would already know, right? If I'm, as a human would do this, I already know the plane connections. I already know the airports. Now I have to look up the train connections. But if we today trained this to an AI, we have to start from scratch and give it the plane connections again, plus the train connections, and then have it choose from it. And I think that is, we cannot fulfill the promise that was put into AI. And I don't know if you read The Economist that basically said, like, okay, the hype is out of AI now. Next AI winter coming, because AI can't fulfill its promise, that is just because of that. We spend so much money and time, and we need so much data extracted out of things to train for really small problems. That it's time to build machines that can deal with more than one problem, or at least reuse what they've already learned on a different problem and only learn what's in addition. Right? We're working on a machine like this, and if you look at the AlphaGo initiative from Google, that's it, right? It plays Go, but it can teach itself to play chess, and so on.
Yeah. So I have a question in terms, in the light of what you've just said. On the one hand, building a platform, building a system, building algorithms that can, function on a multi-level and can be applied to several types of questions without changing the nature of the algorithm, or without retraining the system. That is an effort that's like a research project that takes a lot of time, that takes also a lot of very clever people. On the other hand, you have the short life cycles of companies, company life, venture capital, people putting money in certain efforts, and they want to see the return on investment as quickly as possible. So how do we bring these two together?
You don't, right? That is exactly the reason why we have all these very good narrow AI solutions that then do their little narrow job really, really well. And the companies then focus on usability and integrating into the applications and so on. But only the ones with a very long perspective will actually engage in building these type of platforms, which I happen to believe is the type of platforms that we need in economy, because those are the type of platforms that can take our knowledge, like in the end, it's take our knowledge and free us up, right? So we can do different things. Take our knowledge and do the task that we do today so we can move on.
Yeah, moving on. I mean, to be able to move on, also you need to start training differently the people. We're still training people in not only in AI, but also in schools. We're training them in a very narrow path, don't you think?
Look, I could. I have to play sad songs now.
Yeah.
We are trying to cram knowledge into people's heads. And it gets ever more specialized. What we really should teach people is how to learn and how to be curious. Right? Because it's not about, if we're talking about a new way of learning, it's not just about how can we put a school in a Zoom room. It's actually the question of how can we make the idea of learning not something that you're glad to get rid of when you're like 20.
Yeah.
Or 25 or 30. Right? Most people have this glorified notion of all the pranks they played when they were in school or college. But most people, not all, but most people say like, I am so happy this is over.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back to work. While at the same time, we're all talking about lifelong learning, which is what's happening and which is what's normal for us as people. We are made to lifelong learn. I mean, every kid is a little scientist. They make a hypothesis, they try it out empirically, and then they draw their conclusions. And that's how it should work. And we are being taught, like, really, we're moving away from theory, and we're taught very practical knowledge that we can apply immediately, instead of actually learning how the world works.
Yeah.
You can see this in computer science, right? A while back in computer science, we taught people the principles of computer science, and how algorithms work and how to design them and so on. Today, we teach them a programming language. We teach them Python or Java or whatever it is, and they come out. But when the next language generation comes on, there is a big gap, because now these people have to learn a new language, and it's really complicated for them. But if you see someone who's been taught the principles, they can learn a new language, no problem, because they all follow the same principle, right? So I am totally for, I am much for a broader education. I think that people, if you were supposed to be a responsible person, your judgment needs to stand on broad feet, on a broad foundation. And that means that you can't be just a specialist in that one thing. You should be a specialist in that one thing, maybe, but you need to know about other things, right? So if you love literature, you're not supposed to say math sucks. Yeah. Right? You're supposed to say math is beautiful too. I'm not as good as it. That's why I'm going to literature, but it's beautiful too. Right. And the other way around, just the other way around. And this is, I think, really something that now it's coming, right? Digitization is coming very quickly because of the pandemic. Everything is accelerated. And very quickly we will learn that what we're actually learning is to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking at
you're a professional musician, right? You know
yes.
you know how long it takes to be perfect, right? And this is not, you're not learning you don't need a teacher to tell you, wow, that didn't sound right, let's play it again and again and again and again. What you need is motivation to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then when you want to learn a new technique, right, then you need a teacher. And when you want to learn expression, then you need a teacher, and so on. So this is, it's very different than that. I think very few people today would have the discipline to actually complete the learning like musicians do.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, without willing to go into a new kind of discussion, but we sometimes hear these things around repetition, right? So computers should be taking over the repetitive work. And as a musician, you say like, well, wait a second, repetitive work is not repetitive work, because there is repetition. You need to do it in order to go to a level of virtuosity. And that's actually, soul-opening, mind-opening repetition.
This whole notion of only repetitive work gets automated, right? That comes from industrialization. In industrialization, we said, like, we wanted to use economies of scale, because the more of a single thing we make, the cheaper it gets. So what we do is we analyze, we standardize, we consolidate, and then we have enough volume to allow us to build a factory or a process, right? And this is how we define repeatability. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the known, right? Well, if you know something, if you know it well, right, that's when it starts boring you. And you still might find it intriguing because people laugh at it, or people love it when you play it and stuff like this. But you already know it. And I know that every musician is, even if you're good at something, at some point you have to try something new, right? Because the old stuff, yes, it's difficult, and you have to practice, and you'll get bad if you don't practice, but you want to try something new because you know you already can do that. And even if it's totally, it doesn't matter if it's repetitive or not. It's the question. It's about the known and the unknown. And I think that we as people, we should be way more intrigued by the unknown. But today we're pretty much afraid of the unknown. I mean, think that used to be very different. Think of the great ages of the explorers. Everybody was intrigued by the unknown. Like
Yeah.
all the adventure stories that were written and the beautiful books and so on, right? All the people that went out to the unknown. I think these explorers are still out there. They probably don't allow themselves to speak up.
I think you're one of them. And I have a question for you, an unknown, because now we have the joke section within our entrepreneur's kitchen. Why are fish so smart?
Why are fish so smart? I don't have the slightest clue.
Well, because they live in schools.
Okay.
Terrible joke. Do you have one for me too?
Well, of course, I've got to tell a mathematician joke, right? So,
yeah.
So you have a mathematician and a theoretical physicist, or a practical physicist and an astrophysicist traveling in a train in Scotland, and they see a black sheep. So the astrophysicist says, like, "Whoa, look at that! In Scotland, all the sheep are black. All the sheep are black." And the practical physicist is like, no, dear colleague, you can't say that. We don't know that. What we can say is, we can say there are black sheep in Scotland. And the mathematician just shakes his head and said, like, "Gentlemen, you are so wrong. The only thing we can say that in Scotland, there's at least one sheep that is black on one side."
Yeah, awesome.
Right? Mathematician jokes. Actually, I should
Mathematician
have
jokes.
called blunt jokes, right? But blunt jokes tend to be always like on the let's say not publishable side.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, we publish everything. There is no censorship here. And I even managed to make a salad. So on the side,
Hey, let me see that again.
yeah,
Looks nice.
Yeah, that's really good. And
Pumpkin oil on that.
that's a good. That's a great idea. I will do that in a second. I just want to say thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today. It was an awesome conversation. It's, as always, very insightful to chat with you about all these topics. And I'm wishing you all the best with the future of your endeavors. So where is it going now?
Thank you very much. Well, as I said, digitization is accelerated right now because of Corona. And now it's even more important that we don't miss out taking along the people on the ride, right? That is the most important thing that we can do now while economies are changing, is we have to make sure that we don't leave people behind.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now. And tonight, guys, Thursday night, you can watch this on Facebook at 9 p.m. Have fun and ask us questions. Even after the show, we will answer them. Thank you so much for joining in. Bye.
Thank you.